Hello YouTubers, this is your friendly neighborhood Theophage. So this video is on free will. The subject kind of came up recently again, and I felt compelled, as it were, against my free will, to make a video on it. I am a compatibilist. For those of you who don't know, that is the philosophical position that free will and determinism are compatible with each other. Some people believe that the universe is deterministic and thus free will cannot exist. People's choices are not free. They are just as unfree as strict cause and effect. Earlier state produces a later state. There's no choosing involved. People just kind of go with what is the only thing that can happen. And there are other people who believe that determinism is not true because there is free will. People make choices which affect things even though the non-intelligent part of the universe may follow a deterministic plan of cause and effect. The fact that we are intelligent beings living in such a universe changes things. And these are incompatibilist positions. They hold that free will and determinism can't exist in the same universe. And me being a compatibilist, I say they can. The problem with other incompatibilist positions, I think, is that we don't all agree on what free will exactly entails. If you were to ask me, do I believe in free will, my answer would have to be yes and no, because of the strange nature of the term free will. I think what many people believe is free will actually breaks down into two parts, A and B, okay? And if I were to say, yes, I believe that free will exists, it's because I accept A. And if I were to say, no, I don't believe free will exists, it's because I don't accept part B. And if you talk to some people, if I say that I don't agree with B, they say, oh, well, you don't believe in free will because free will requires B. And I don't think that that's necessarily true. Now, what are A and B then? The first part, A, of free will is self-determination. Self-directed volition. I am choosing what it is that I am choosing. The choice isn't made for me. It is my decision, and I can choose between options. I think that's the first part that you need to have free will. The problem is the other part of free will, the B part that I don't really accept. If you talk to some people, some incompatibilists who believe in free will but not determinism, the way that they feel that choices are made adds an extra magical almost ingredient to the choice, which is what free will brings. I mean, choices are made based on external factors. I'm going to make a choice based on what is going on around me. I'm going to make a choice based on internal factors, how I feel about the factors that are involved, how I feel at the time, my own ideas and so forth. But then there is also a third thing which enters into the choice. And I don't accept that there is some magical third thing. I think that choices are only made based on external factors and internal factors. Now, where determinism fits in this is the fact that if it is true what those other people believe about free will, that this other factor, this is not a deterministic factor. If our decisions are only made based on external factors and internal factors, then if you had perfect knowledge of all those factors, you could determine what someone's decision is before they make it. In fact, their decision would be determined. I mean, it's just a matter of adding up the factors and go, oh, well, that's what they're going to decide. And they really don't have a choice in what they decide. And it is that additional non-deterministic thing that free will supposedly adds is the reason why determinism and free will aren't compatible. But I don't really accept the idea that just because there is a cause and effect, a deterministic factor, that takes away from the freedom of our will. I agree that determinism doesn't allow for this extra magical third factor, but I don't think what you're left with when you take that away, making decisions based on external factors and internal factors, I don't believe that strips us of our free will. And it's why, like I said, I would answer the question, do I believe in free will? Yes and no. So if things are deterministic, if things flow from a cause and effect, a strict cause and effect basis, how can we have freedom of will? Well, let's go back to what it would be like if we didn't have free will. Many times the example is used of robots. I've heard it said a lot, God gave us free will because he doesn't want robots. A robot is, the epitome of not having free will. And why is that? Well, because a sufficiently programmed robot can make decisions. He can examine things and make choices, based on the states of things. But the choices that he makes are not his own choices. They are pre-programmed choices, kind of like an if-then. If this is like this, then do that. If it's like that, then do this other thing, and so forth. He doesn't really have any control over the choices. He just kind of navigates through the menus of what to do next. I agree that does not display free will. The choices are all made originally by the programmer. But human decision-making is not quite like that. We make our decisions based on external factors, just like the robot does. But our internal factors can be influenced by ourselves. We can program ourselves. Just by thinking about or reflecting on the decision that we need to make, we have already changed our own internal landscape. We've already changed the internal factors which go into that decision. I mean, human decision-making is a lot more complex than the robot's decision-making because of these feedback-type loops. The fact that not only am I making a decision based on these factors, but thinking about these factors is also a factor in the decision-making, and so forth. And not only that, decisions that I've made in the past and reflections that I've made on those decisions also then change what decisions I may make in the future. It's not in the case of the robot where the programming was generated by the programmer and it's like it is and it stays like it is, and the only thing that changes is the external stimulus with which the robot reacts to. In the case of human beings, we react to changing external stimulus, and we also react to changing internal states. We change our own states. We are writing our own programs. And that is why our will is self-determined rather than determined by someone else. And that is why our will is free. It's not free in the sense of being free from causality. It is free in the sense that all of the external factors do not dictate our position. The exact same external factors, we may make this choice this time, but then a different choice a different time, because our decisions are also made by these internal factors as well. Whereas in the case of a robot, if you get the exact same external stimulus, the exact same programming, you're going to get the exact same thing happening all the time. And that is the kind of non-free will determinism that people who believe in incompatibilist free will reject. They say human beings are obviously not like that, thus determinism can't be true. And my point is, well, you're right, of course human beings aren't like that. But how human beings actually work combines them both. It is a deterministic factor. Our unconscious mind, we do have a sort of tally sheet where all the factors are given scores and added up and so forth. All of that happens unconsciously, but our conscious reflection about things changes the scores, and it makes the decisions not just reactions to programming, but it makes the decisions our own. So in that sense, it is not freedom from cause and effect, but freedom from complete determinism from the outside. That is the free part of free will. Now, why is free will important? Free will is important because it is used in the idea of morality. You see, some people argue that without free will, no one can be held morally accountable. SysiphusRedeemed did an excellent talk, which he has as a YouTube video. You should go watch that. I'll leave a link in the underbar, where he gives an example of a guy named Ed. And Ed is at the top of the building. A wind comes along and blows Ed off of the building. Ed falls upon an innocent bystander below, killing him. Should Ed be held morally accountable for what he has done? He's fallen on this innocent bystander and killed him. And of course, most people will say, no, Ed should not be held morally accountable for that because it was something that was not under his control. He did not have the freedom to choose not to fall off the building. The wind just made him do that. And he gives another example of Fred, or Free Ed. Fred jumps off of the building and lands on an innocent bystander below, killing the innocent bystander. Now, should Fred be held morally responsible? And of course, most people would answer yes. I mean, after all, he chose to jump, and the killing of the bystander happened as a direct result of a choice that Fred made, and so Fred should have some kind of moral responsibility. Now, an incompatibilist who believed in free will would say, if determinism is true, then not even Fred could be held morally responsible because he was no more in control of his action, of his jumping off the roof, than Ed was. Something beyond his control forced him into that state. He was following the cause and effect pattern of the universe. But I disagree with that because in the case of Fred, even though Fred's action was a direct cause and effect result, as if determinism were true, Fred's choice was made with knowledge. Fred's own knowledge of the situation fed into the choice. It's not like Ed's situation where the wind just blew Ed and it was not Ed's intention to fall off. Fred's choice was made with the intention of hitting the bystander and killing him. It's his fault that it happened because even though the decision was a simple deterministic adding up of things, what went into the decision, Fred's internal thoughts and ideas which went into making that decision, are Fred's. That's where Fred's moral responsibility comes from, his own input into that decision. Now remember, morality is not as much about action as it is about intent. Two different people taking the same action but with different intent have a different moral responsibility in the action. If I did something that was bad but I didn't mean to do it, it was an accident, that isn't the same moral responsibility. I mean, certainly there's some culpability due to negligence, possibly, but that's not the same moral responsibility as someone who intended for that thing to happen, carried it out, and it happened, and that thing being a morally bad thing. Intention is there whether or not the choice is deterministic. And that's why, in my compatibilist view, the free will that we do have is sufficient for moral accountability, because the free will that we do have is our own self-input to the choice, our own intention being carried out, and it is that intention which carries the moral responsibility. And certainly the intention is our own. The intention is not provided to us from the outside, like in the case of a robot and his programming. The intention is our own. It comes from us. Whether it is deterministic or not, it comes from us, and that is why we are held morally responsible, whereas a robot, we would not be held morally responsible for the decisions it makes, because the decisions aren't its own. It is simply following its programming. So anyway, I apologize for the long, rambly, unscripted, and possibly incoherent nature of the video. I've been pretty disorganized for a while, and but I felt strongly enough that I wanted to go ahead and make the video anyway, even though there's a lot of other things that I ought to be doing. So let me know what you think. Is my reasoning, does it make sense? Does it not make sense? Are there obvious glaring flaws? I don't respond to everybody who leaves me comments. I would like to, but I read them all and I take them all into consideration. So feel free to let me know what you think.
This is your friendly neighborhood Theophage reminding you, don't just swallow it whole. Make sure you chew it up first.